You said that the fail rate changed dramatically. Do parents think that's good, or do they think that's kind of a pain?
With regard to our transition from an on-course test to an on-road test, parents absolutely love it. They feel it's a much more comprehensive way of evaluating whether their young driver is ready to get behind the wheel. And as all of you know, for those of you that especially that are parents out there, parents are involved in every aspect of the upbringing of their children. And they're involved in their sports programs, they're involved with their academics as they're going through the school systems. But guess what? When they become 16 years old, they tend to turn over the responsibility of training somebody how to drive to the driving schools and to us as DMVs or motor vehicles. And they want us to properly screen their young teenagers and to determine whether or not they are ready to get behind the wheel. And that's the importance of parental involvement. That I get are from teenagers. I'm not saying that all teenagers fall in this category, but some teenagers have emailed me and said that they love the new rules. They feel that this enhances safety because...
I remember coming home from Africa and reading an article in their airline magazine about traffic fatalities and how it was the leading cause of death in that area, which was a surprise to me because I thought that it was another cause. But it wasn't. It was traffic fatalities. So I'm pleased to see the international effort on raising awareness of this problem. I'm curious to know, from your vantage point, the licensing authorities in other countries, particularly Eastern Europe and the developing countries, have they really taken that message and that campaign to heart yet? And are you seeing them turning their attention to policy and actual program changes that will lead to improved records in road safety?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting to look at it that way, both in the U.S. and in other countries, as taking a more respective role in that area. And as we're seeing in many of the countries, like you mentioned, Africa, and even China, if you've traveled there recently, they're seeing a huge increase of drivers now and automobiles on the road. So there's a huge responsibility there in the licensing process for them. But that's an area of ownership that we haven't seen as much activity as we hope to see as we progress in this. But there is an interest in serving that. And a part of the role here in the U.S. and the work that we're doing is also to educate those traveling abroad. Most of us try and figure out whether or not we should drink the water if we're going to a certain country, or what shots we might need to get. And even our youth who are going and doing all of the international studies that they do, but they don't necessarily know how to read the road signs or what the laws are in that country. And if you've been to our exhibit booth here, we have 3 youth who are with us, and they were talking to me as they were listening to a lot of what's going on at this conference, and they said that here in the U.S., even the youth who are coming to study abroad, when they come here, they're 18. So they're not necessarily going through the whole educational process that they had to go through, but they're sharing the roads with them. So I think as a universal point, we're hoping to see more work on that in all areas, but especially in the underdeveloped countries as well.
To share a copy of the recommendations with you, and several of my colleagues in this room have asked me for copies, and I've forwarded to them. And many of the recommendations are from the standpoint of basically reinforcing what we've already done from a standpoint of driving school instructor, additional training for them, beefing up quality assurance from the standpoint of doing additional audit checks of driving schools once again, and just a lot of those type of recommendations that you can pretty much institute improvements on.
Training, testing from on-course to on-road. And I found out in South Carolina that we do something similar, but we're sort of stupid about it because we're very risk-averse. When we moved it on-road, we refused to put it in any place other than residential communities. And we found every driving school under the sun testing their kids in residential communities. And we were doing it because we were afraid that these inexperienced drivers would not handle the roads well, but we're willing to certify them one day later and put them on a license out on the roads themselves. And so the key is for our process right now, and there are not a lot of people happy with, we're going to move every one of the testing routes out of the residential communities and into the highways and where we can on the freeways. And I don't see any other reasonable way of doing it because they're getting there the next day.
Well, my general response to that is it's a very delicate balance because when we transitioned from a strictly on-course to a on-road testing, it was just that. It was a tug of war between our customer service objectives with that of our driver safety objectives. And so we very strategically kind of outlined at each one of our branch locations a very strategic course layout that minimized, that did enough highway and enough residential and secondary roadway, and it's balanced in terms of the overall timing of the test itself.
Something that I noticed in my local newspaper a couple of days ago, and I think it's really relevant, and I'm curious to see if how much it's on your radar and the kind of things that might be being done to address this issue, and it's in particular to do with aging drivers. And the statistics stating that it's the fastest growing demographic. CMTA is taking this on as a national project supporting our 3 standing committees, and I'm just curious what jurisdictions are doing in that area.
Couple things. In Wisconsin, we have no age-based requirements. We have devoted considerable new energy to looking at driver fitness broadly, and we will expand those efforts moving forward. I think the research is very, very interesting, that it's a pretty late age at which age actually becomes a predictor. But there are some correlates. There is a session tomorrow or Tuesday on driver think that there will be some very robust research in mining the data that comes out of those different practices to see what the outcomes are and if we can learn more.
Existence. It's been around since the 1940s, I think. And basically, our motto in Maryland has been basically safe mobility for life, whomever, or even self-referrals to our medical advisory board, because we make full use of our medical advisory board. That if you have something that's afflicting you, that's affecting your ability to drive and operate safely behind the wheel, you can either self-refer, your family member can refer you, certainly more frequently than none. Law enforcement, when you get pulled over by law enforcement forces you and refers you to the motor vehicle administrator for a mandatory evaluation. So we go through that process, and we get a lot of referrals from all different sources. And as they come in, we do a full evaluation of the individual's physical health, whether or not that person can continue to drive behind the wheel.
High-risk drivers, I know, is on everyone's radar. And in Canada, at this point, there's a bit of a patchwork in terms of the policies, legislation, and practices that are used in terms of mandatory testing or mandatory medical reporting at certain ages or not. And if not, then what other strategies are in place. And that's one of the reasons why CCMTA decided at its board of directors meeting to really take this issue head on and try and pull together some of the best practices information that's out there for the benefit of the 14 jurisdictions in Canada. And there's some pretty significant research going on in Canada right now. There's a project called the CanDrive project, which has a number of different components to it and is looking at all aspects of senior drivers, aging drivers, and the extent to which mandatory testing or mandatory reporting may be justifiable based on crash records. And
is on the panel. It's at 3:30 tomorrow that is going to talk about senior licensing, and it will include some research that we had with the
Super. Thanks for that ad. I think we are just a little bit past time this afternoon. The weather in here, I think, is really not quite as nice as the weather out there.